What does someone on a spiritual path do with all of the upset in the world in these last years, especially since 2020? And it doesn't seem to be abating. Don't worry, this isn't going to be about politics because I'm not someone who is deeply researched and have studied it. So I try not to have an opinion. This is going to be some practical counsel if you're a sensitive person and you've really struggled in these last few years with what's going on. This is Ariana Rollins with the Manifesting Guide, and this is podcast number 48, How to Stay on Track in a World That Feels So Crazy. If you're someone sensitive and you have felt perhaps, gosh, I'm being insensitive by not following politics and tracking everything that's going on, I'm hoping this podcast will give you insight and empowerment. But before we do that, if you're tired of pushing and forcing yourself to get things done, get your Manifest Without Force or Frustration gift at highertrueself.com. It's completely free. And if you want notifications when I release a new episode, go to highertrueself.com/podcast. This is Ariana Rollins, and this is episode 48. How does a spiritual person handle all the turmoil in the world? This is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. I'll give a little personal background before I get into some suggestions, some helpful tips. So I remember when I was very young and early on in my spiritual path, I kept my eyes straight forward. I didn't notice what was going on in the news. If a friend was talking about her recent experience of being a juror on a murder trial, I wouldn't listen. I couldn't hear it because I was very sensitive to how information affected my body. And I guess that was a good thing. And the content, while it was very uplifting for her and a growth experience, the nitty-gritty detail of her murder was too much because it was real. There's something different if you're watching a movie. Yes, a part of our unconscious mind gets engaged and thinks it's real, which is why sometimes, you might have an upsetting night's sleep after watching a potentially violent movie. But a part of us is also aware, but there is a big difference between real and make-believe. So I was very careful of what I took in. Very careful about the movies I watched, the conversations I had, the books I read. And you might think, wow, gosh, that sounds like Ariana lived in a bubble. And yes and no, in a way I did, because I knew my mindset, my emotional state, my frequency would impact everything that was happening in my life, and it impacted others. So, for example, when my son was born, I had this very strong sense that there were influences out there in media, movies, radio, that I didn't want him to be exposed to when he was very young. We don't have filters. Up until we're 7 years old, we are just like a sponge. We are taking in everything. And I know sometimes we, as children, we've taken in things that were just not right for us. And that creates shock, that creates trauma. It can create a disconnect from our true self. So I was very careful about what he was exposed to. And I vetted things. Now, as a 26-year-old young man, he's pretty grounded. He's pretty centered. He didn't lose track of who he is. And he has a natural leadership quality that people are drawn to. He seems mature beyond his years. Who knows? I think he popped out like that. But who knows if my ability and my sensitivity to the media, maybe it did help him. So if you're someone who's just wondering how to handle all this, maybe you're someone who says, is there truth to what's going on? Have we been deceived? Maybe you love to do research and you're watching YouTube videos and on Facebook, social media, trying to get to the truth, with a capital T. And if you are, more power to you. I have too much sensitivity to do that. And I will tell you, I did do some of that because early on, I had my own intuitions about what was happening, but there was no way to prove it. So I did do some research, and I'm not going to make this a political podcast by any means, but we are being faced with, I believe, the most tumultuous time in human history ever. There's so much deception, there's so much propaganda, there's so much shock happening. I mean, real stuff. People with violence, right? I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want you to connect to that mentally or emotionally. But this is real. So do we bury our heads in the sand as a person on a spiritual path? Or do we do deep dive research and uncover the truth with a capital T, which, by the way, the truth could change just as quickly as next week. So I don't know if there is any truth in the media and what's going on in the political arena of the world. I don't know if we can really find that. So what to do? Well, one of the things I do is I know that if it's important for me to know something, a friend or a loved one will reach out and let me know. I've never told them to do that. It just happens. Like when 9/11 happened in the United States. Someone contacted me and told me what was going on. Did I rush to the TV to watch it live? No. I did not want to be connected to that plane of consciousness, the plane of mind, the emotional whirlpool of people's fears. I guess that's a blessing because I was born so sensitive that I knew that would not be healthy, because all minds were turned to that around the world. And that energy, if someone's sensitive, they can take it into themselves. So I did not. I didn't see any of that until well after the event. Now, maybe somebody would have judgment about that. Well, why aren't you caring? Why don't you want to know what's going on? Well, my friends, I think my level of caring is that I want to be present for who's in my life. Are they going through something? Is a client going through something? That's where I put my care. When there is something that's completely outside of my control, then that's where I pull back and I say, what can I do here? Is there anything I can do here? And I find the people who need my support will come to me. So investing my time and energy and emotions, which our emotions are a prime manifesting force, for something that I can't make an impact on, I can't change, has not been a good use or good investment of my resources. So one of the things that I notice, and perhaps it's because of this, I'm not sure, is that for my age, I have a lot of energy and a lot of vitality and a lot of stamina. And a lot of times, as humans, we age, we get tired very quickly. We don't have the energy to do what we want at the moment we want to. We don't have the fitness level, to hike or go lift weights or just participate in life at the level we would like to. And I suspect that it's because I do manage my energy. I do watch where I put my attention. Where do I invest my mental capacity? Where am I putting it? And what's the outcome I want? So for me, I'm an avid reader and a lifelong learner. And so I am looking for things that can help people. So I read certain books, I listen to certain podcasts, and I glean content from it, and I apply it. I put it into my own life, give it a test drive, and then you'll find it turning up in either some of my live masterclasses or in podcasts or in our programs with the Higher True Self. My energy is not limitless. And I think for all humans, we get to a point when we realize that. We have 70, 80, 90 years on the planet. And where are we putting our attention? Is it something that will further our spiritual growth and evolution? Will it help humanity? Will it help our family and friends? Or are we caught up in trying to uncover something that we may never know the truth? So let me give you some more tips. That was one thing that I did, is be very cautious about where I allow my mind to go and what I'm watching. The second one is to realize when I've been hooked in. What do I mean? Sometimes I'll get this intuitive hit to listen to NPR, National Public Radio in the United States. I don't know if it's like that in the rest of the world. And so I'll be doing errands, so I'll turn the car, on, and I'll flip over to the radio, NPR. And instantly I'll get a little nugget of information. 2 minutes, I'm done. And I switch over to music. So I allow my unconscious or my intuitive mind, which is really how the unconscious communicates, and I allow it to direct me. I get what I need and I turn off. But what happens if you get hooked in and they say, oh, we're going to have a guest speaker right after this break and they're going to tell us about blah, blah, blah. Be aware. Have you been hooked in? Are you now part of their agenda? And if you are, it takes some mental discipline. I'll teach you a tip on something I did early in my 20s to train my brain to not go down rabbit holes and waste my time and energy, is turn it off. Even if you feel there might be a little another tidbit or nugget. So we need to train our brain. We need to train it to be working at our command, our behest. Weird word, just popped out. I'll have to look at what it means in a moment. Sometimes I use words and I don't know what they mean, and then I look it up. It's like, oh, that's exactly what it was supposed to be. That's, I guess, what happens when you store things. We all have stored experiences and references and terms in our unconscious mind, and they just pop out if we allow it. So training your brain, I'll give you a quick tip that I used mid-20s, and it worked effectively because our brain loves new things. It loves stimulation. It loves drama. It loves anything that's exciting, which is why we get so hooked on movies. Me too. I love movies. I watch them every night. Okay, way you can do it is, this was when, we couldn't watch anything whenever we wanted, right? This was when we had video recorders, VCRs, where you could record a show. So there was a particular show that I used to watch. I don't recall the name of it, but this was way back in the 90s. And I would record it, and then I would watch it at a selected time. So I made a deal with my brain that if I had a particular task to get done, I don't know, maybe it was, I remember I was refurbishing my home when I lived in Windsor, England, and it was a lot of work. So with my brain, I would say, okay, we're going to be doing the wallpapering in this room. And when we get that done, you can watch your show. So it's little things like that it sounds small, but if we can practice discipline, and the root word, the Latin root of discipline is indisciple. Indisciple, if we become our own disciple, if we are training our brain and we're training our body, which is why I love the Higher True Self work, it's all about that. Then we become more effective, we become more focused, we feel we've accomplished something with our day and time, and we get off the emotional roller coaster, my friends. That's what it is like right now. It's an emotional roller coaster. And if we keep seeking some meaningful truth out of that, we could spend an enormous amount of energy and time. And then what do we have at the end of the day? Have we finished that project that maybe would contribute to humanity? Maybe it's a book you're thinking about writing, or maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe you're thinking of going back to school and retraining to be a psychotherapist because you want to help humans. Or maybe it's that spiritual book that you've been wanting to read that you're drawn to. But if we use our time and our energy up on things that are fleeting, things that are temporary, things that are in the material world like shifting sands, then we really don't have a life that we are building. We are subject to the outside world, and that grows anxiety. And that's one of the things that I observed when this whole thing was going on in 2020, which I call it the virus. I've demeaned it. Is that the word, demeaned? I've lowered its importance in my consciousness because I didn't want to be controlled by it. So I will rename things in a way that it's a virus. Okay, it was a real virus. It is a real virus. But I don't make it into this big term that the media loves to use to scare the bejeebers out of us. That's a fun word, bejeebers, right? Because I know how we can get manipulated, and probably because I was so manipulated when I first started my own business. I was looking for guidance, looking for help, and I could get so easily sold. Not now. Not now. I've got much greater discernment. So the last thing, I guess the third tip we're going to talk about is discernment. How do you know if something's right for you to investigate, to read, to follow? How do you know who to trust? That's a very big question, and probably why I created the whole true self-alignment work, is because trusting is so important to live a peaceful, fulfilling life. And it's not the kind of trusting that you might think, like trusting somebody, like knowing who to trust, knowing what to trust, knowing who to listen to. That is part of trusting, but it's very hard to do that level of trusting unless we trust ourselves, because that's foundational. How do you learn how to trust yourself? Well, one thing is you can start to write down some experiences in your life where you had an intuitive hit and you followed it, you trusted it. Write these down and you'll start to gather evidence. Wow, I really can listen to my intuition. It really helped me there. And then another piece of paper, I'd like you to write down, different piece of paper, when you didn't trust your intuition. What happened? Did you get that niggly feeling like, oh, I should have listened to it? Well, I don't know if it's a funny story. It's not a funny story. It's kind of a very disappointing and kind of a stressful story. So just this week, my son called me and says, after all that money I just put into my car, I put new tires on it, the cylinder's gone on the car, the engine's gone. And I was like, I can't drive it. I don't know what to do. So he just finished the Air Force and went back to university to wrap up his bachelor's degree. He doesn't live on campus. It's a 20 or 30 minute drive. So I knew that he was really in a dire situation. So I'm not going to go into the whole story of what happened, but I remember it was about 6 months ago when he was still in the Air Force, when he could have easily qualified for a car loan. And he said, I'm thinking about getting a new car. And I instantly got intuitively, yep, I get it's a really good idea. And he did too. But he was trying to save money. Gosh, I appreciate that. But that was the thing, that we both had a strong intuitive hit. And I know, especially with my son, he has a really good, strong connection with his intuition. And when he trusts it, it's golden. When he doesn't, he suffers things and suffers some, challenges. So trusting ourselves above and beyond everything else, everyone else, even if it's our spouse, our best friends, just a loved one, trusting ourselves above and beyond everyone and everything outside, that will help us navigate the world. And if you would like more information on the true self-alignment work, please reach out, and I would love to share that with you. It was life-changing for me. It helped transform how I turn up in my relationships, my friendships, and very significantly, my business. I did what I call a true self-alignment work on my business, so I turned up more authentically, more powerfully, And my work doesn't feel like work because I can bring all of myself to it. And I'm not putting on this kind of big hairy coat like, I got to go to work today and I got to put on this act and this role. I'm just me. And I share that. All right, so as we wrap up, I hope that was helpful and hope it didn't get too political. That's not my intention here. But I would love to know what you are doing to manage this crazy time on the planet. And if I could help at all, please reach out. So if you've enjoyed the episode, please follow me at facebook.com/highertrueself. And if you're tired of pushing and forcing yourself to get things done, get your Manifest Without Force or Frustration gift at highertrueself.com. It's completely free. Remember, self-confirmation frees you to succeed on your terms. When you confirm yourself, when you trust yourself, you stop looking for others to recognize you, and it frees you to be you. Thanks so much for listening.